Hello, Hockey World. It is February 24th, 2017, and it would be Friday if that matters to anyone. Go ahead.
I'm Mike Lagello.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is a podcast that comes to you every Monday through Friday at this time. And I'm sorry I'm talking so quickly. I've been in that mode all day of quick talking and trying to get things done fast because things are just accelerating into the trade deadline now, more so than the last couple of years. And I really hate to say that because I have a feeling that we'll just be bored out of our minds. But but for what it's worth, I mean, just because trades aren't made doesn't mean that rumors don't happen. That's what I've learned, so we can sit there and have no trades be made, but my God, rumors were going like crazy throughout the entire thing. So that's where I'm at right now, Mike.
Well, yeah, believe me, I'm compiling a list of talking points to discussion points that we can talk about on Wednesday in case there aren't a lot of trades. But I have a feeling there'll maybe be more than last year and less than some of the more recent years when we had a bunch of little trades. I'm optimistic that there'll be something. I just don't know if there's going to be anything really, really impactful.
Yeah, I mean, like we've seen a couple of these small trades so far. We'll see more of those for sure. They always happen, but there's less money than ever been out there before. We talked about that before. There's definitely less money to be spent. I would love to do a research on that. I should do that every year. I should go around and go back and see exactly how much cap space there was.
Well, I mean, see, there's money, but it's a question of whether teams want to avail themselves of the, like there are teams that have money that they can put on long-term injury and open up space, but is it in their budget? Does Tampa Bay put Stamkos on LTIR early in the season? Are they going to put Ryan Callahan on our LTIR if they haven't already to open up more space, or are they in sell mode? And I know that you mentioned something about Ben Bishop in your blog. Are they in sell mode, and that means it doesn't really matter? That means that they're going to sell off players, and they're just they're not going to go try to make a charge for a playoff spot.
Right. And we might be joined by Kevin Allen shortly. And I was not sure whether I wanted to hold off on talking about this whole Shattenkirk thing until he got here or not, but we'll give him a little bit more time. He's also chasing stuff, so he might not be able to join us right now. Things are kind of fluid all over the place. But let's start with Berglund, because Berglund just signed a contract, if we could. And that's the breaking news that's just out. 5-year, $3.9 million per year, I guess it is.
3.85. Yeah. So
take that extra $500,000, we'll be good to go.
I'll definitely take it. Believe me.
You and I could live happily on that. We'll be fine.
Sure.
But yeah, so 3.85, 3.9 was the big difference. Here we go. So there you have it. So that just happened, and it's fascinating that this would happen today. I think, given what happened apparently yesterday, and the timing on this, I believe, was yesterday morning. And I want to do some history on this Shattenkirk Tampa thing for a second.
Okay.
As you guys remember, hopefully if you're paying attention, or even if you're not, I've been talking about Tampa and Shattenkirk since the very beginning, and I've been saying that is the place he's most likely heading. And I even brought up on the show, am I the only one? Because I was getting concerned. Am I the only one saying this? Like a couple of days ago, remember I said, am I the only one who still thinks Shattenkirk going to Tampa? And I was the only one at that point too. So then last night, word comes out that he turned down a trade. And since then, other things have come out that he's turned down other trades, that he turned down a trade to Arizona, that he turned down a trade to Edmonton. Now, the Edmonton one was reported before, and I had heard that as well, that was something that, we knew that, that when they moved Hall for, Larson, I had been told there was a better trade that fell through for them at the last minute, and that they felt like at that point they had to move Hall because they were pretty much committed to it.
And the Arizona one was reported. It's just a question of when that overtrade happened. I mean, yesterday came out that it happened in November. I mean, the thing was that there were rumors about that around the time that they made the trade for Goligoski, which was back in the summer. So I mean, it wasn't 100% sure when that was, but it made sense because Arizona is looking to build their blue line especially. But the Tampa one, I mean, you called it, but honestly, after the details of that came out, I think there is there's right now, no indication or no, I think, chance that he signs that he takes a deal that's a sign and trade. It just doesn't add up because, I mean, the parameters of that deal was a 7-year deal, $42 million, $6 million AAV, and that's Tampa where there is no state tax. And that just tells me that he wants to test the market and he thinks he can get more than that on the open market. And he may be right.
We are joined by the great and only Kevin Allen of USA Today. Hello, Kevin.
Well, hello. I'm happy to be here. I think I can jump right on this. We must be talking about the Shattenkirk turning down the contract. I think it has less to do with the money and more to do about where he wants to play. I mean, the one thing that we have sort of learned in the salary cap era is that everybody's going to get their money and they're going to get a lot of it. And everybody's sort of, I mean, obviously money plays a role in it, but I think what's happened is there's been sort of a shift where players kind of want to go where they want to go. And I think that's what that was about. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with Tampa Bay, because as Mike said, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to go there. First of all, they're a highly competitive team. They've got Stamkos, they got Hedman, they've got
great place to live. I mean,
they've got Kucherov. I mean, all that kind of stuff. And the money is pretty good, no state tax and so forth. But if he's got his heart set on playing with the New York Rangers, which has been rumored for a while, I don't know whether it's true, but it's been rumored.
It's starting to look that way, isn't it? I mean, this is a sign. I mean, it's one thing to turn down a trade to Edmonton or Arizona, right? Like they rumored to be done before as well. But it's another thing to Tampa, which is an East Coast team, like you said, a great place to live. It makes you really believe that he's got a place, that he's got it in his head, that he's got a place he wants to go.
Well, yeah, and I really respect players for that. Like I respect players that decide, okay, I have free agency. It's not just about the money. It's about, going to a place that he wants to play because maybe he loves the tradition or maybe he's always been fascinated by, playing in Madison Square Garden, or he likes New York City for whatever the reason. So, anyway, I mean, I'm not surprised at any of that. I think if you have this one big shot in the prime of your career to move, and you should take advantage of it because you may get 2 or 3 kicks at the free agent but it's the best time is when you're in the prime of your career, which he is, and that's when you have to really take advantage of it, because the next time around it won't be the same.
But obviously he can't come out and say this is the place I want to go to, because I mean Darren Drager yesterday reported that the Maple Leafs are still kicking the tires on Shattenkirk, which I personally, they'd be foolish not to be keeping an eye on the situation, but I always get the feeling, Kevin, when Toronto is in the mix with a big name, it's because it's Toronto and because it will keep every other team on their toes and maybe pay that little extra that maybe sometimes there's not genuine interest there, but it's more about getting Toronto into the mix. And that's the feeling I get. I don't think Toronto is in the position to pay Shattenkirk $7 million because I don't think that's the type of defenseman that they need. But I think until July the 1st, when he's going for, when he finally decides on the team, I think Toronto is still going to be mentioned because it keeps his name out there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think it's very similar to, when the Detroit Red Wings in the pre-salary cap era, like if you said that the Red Wings, at any major player that was available, if you made the statement that the Red Wings were in on that player, it would have been true. It would have been true because Ken Holland's style of management is that he looks at every available player, and then decides whether or not they should do anything. And in those days, they had the biggest budget, and so they could go after who they want. So if this were the pre-salary cap era, you could say the Red Wings are in on Shattenkirk because you know that Holland would investigate. Well, I think the same is true for the Maple Leafs, is what Mike was saying. Big player. They're an 800-pound gorilla in this league in terms of their ability to, be an important factor. And I'm sure they've reviewed this, and whether or not they're a leading contender, I would doubt it, but they're there.
Yeah. They've got to be there, and I think that's definitely right. Now the question to me becomes a couple things. An interesting twist on this stuff getting out for Shattenkirk, the way this plays. That to me is the interesting thing, because this gets out. that this happened, how much does that possibly change the way St. Louis approaches Shattenkirk now at the deadline? Because now it becomes weird suddenly when a player. I guess from Shattenkirk's side of things, I just guess he could just say, "Listen, I turned it down. I'm not going." So he could just he's fine with, and people will be fine with him staying there.
I think what the effect that this has right now is it ends the possibility of the sign and trade. If he wasn't going to take that deal with Tampa Bay, then like Kevin said, he must have a destination or two that he wants to go to. And unless those teams make a trade for him, I think, it opens it up because he doesn't have a no trade clause in his contract. It opens it up to anybody who thinks that they're a defenseman away from being a Stanley Cup contender or a Stanley Cup winner. And it's going to be a pure rental. Now that lowers the price of what St. Louis can get, but they still get a good return for him as a rental. But I think
but that's my point. Does this get to the point where St. Louis just doesn't move him, where they just sit back and say?
I don't think so. I think I don't think the sign and trade. Like I can imagine that prior to that happening, that the Blues felt or knew or guessed that he wasn't going to go there, because that wasn't, like, no one really thought that was really was a likely occurrence, a sign and trade. Because when you get to this position, again, because you're in the prime of your career, it seems foolish not to at least explore your options. Unless the offer is so overwhelming. So I'm guessing when Doug Armstrong, agreed to that, and even Tampa Bay, I bet they thought, that it was no better than 50-50, but probably less, that he was going to do that. So I don't think it does change everything. I think they've known all along they were going to have to trade him as a rental, and I think the price will still be high. I think it will be a first-round pick, and a very good prospect.
I don't think it precludes the possibility of him getting traded and that team eventually signing him, but I think what it does eliminate is the guarantee or the lock-in of him right as the deal happens. He's gonna, if he gets traded to, wherever, Calgary, I'm just using it as an example, but that's, he's gonna get a chance to play there. He'll get a chance to get a feel for the organization, and if he likes it, then he might be open to the possibility. But there's no guarantee right at the beginning that he's gonna sign a deal.
Yeah, and I think he'll go to July 1 no matter what.
Right.
Just because. He is the spotlight free agent defenseman. Before I thought he was the number one free agent, but now I think it's actually TJ Oshie. But but he's certainly the top defenseman. If you look at I did my top 25 free agents for the summer, and my boss's reaction to it was, "Wow, it's really not a great year for free agents," and I think that's true. So the guys at the top of that list, really, stand out. And Oshie and Shattenkirk, it seems like it would be foolish for them not to see what's available.
It's such a weird year for free agents because of the expansion draft too. Like because that's the other thing, because it's almost as if Vegas is going to just be able to pick who they want from that list. When I looked at that list, Kevin, I'm like, okay, because they've got all the money.
Well, they have all the money, but are players really going to want to go there? I mean, I just got done saying that I really felt that players now destination, and some of them might, because Vegas could overpay, and to be honest with you, they probably will have to overpay just to get to the floor.
Right, I agree.
So it behooves them to maybe do that. If I was Vegas though, and we'll get Mike's thought in this too. I mean, if I was going to have to overpay, I think I'd overpay for character and leadership. Rather than overpay for a guy that maybe isn't worth the money in terms of the, production and so forth. But, if you could get a good guy that you knew was going to be able to help, bring younger players along and so forth, I'd rather pay him the extra money than, to overpay a
star player or somebody who can score.
I'm trying to think of a good example. Like, I wouldn't overpay Radim Verbata or Martin Hansel or someone like that, who are really good players, but I wouldn't overpay their value. But maybe I would, to take in sort of an older player who has a reputation for being able to help and to sort of being an assistant coach on the ice.
Right.
If you're going to have to overpay.
I think that's got TJ Oshie written all over it. And I mean, honestly, think about it. If we're from Vegas's perspective, first of all, like you say, he's probably the best free agent out there. You can't overpay him because not only are you getting, a great player, you're getting a great, shootout player and all that stuff, but you're also getting a actual star player into your market when you're a brand new team. I mean, Oshie he's known throughout the country. He's one of those few players, in America that everybody remembers, who's hockey people, from what he did in the U.S. Olympics. It just feels like they'll just go crazy and offer him a ton of money.
They might, but the one thing that I would like in the example of Oshie, unless Washington wins the Cup this year, he's a player in his late 20s who's never won.
Yeah.
And if you go and sign a 5 or 6 year deal with Vegas, you're basically guaranteeing the rest of your career you're not going to win a Stanley Cup unless
somebody to put on the billboards in Vegas. You need somebody.
You do, but I just don't think. I agree with Mike. I just don't know that he would do that. I mean, it's still about winning. He's going to get his money. Wherever he goes, and unless it. I mean, are you suggesting they're going to give him Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves money?
Yeah, I'm suggesting like $7.5 million.
Yeah, no, I see. I think I agree with Kevin.
It might be worth it to them because also they have to sell shirts. Whose shirt are you going to sell? Like whose shirt are you going to sell?
But I'm just saying, if they offer him $7.5 million, he's not going to do it.
They might not do it. Yeah. So
I agree with Kevin that they'll bring in character guys, and I don't know if I'm just using picking a couple guys off the top of my head who I know are UFAs, who maybe nearing the tail end of their career, but guys like Brooks, guys like Steve Ott, bring in those guys as role players. But I think
Brooks has a huge relationship. But I mean with McPhee and you could totally see Brooks being there.
And Steve Ott makes a lot of sense too. Steve Ott is just a real character guy. So,
but in terms of your jersey selling act, I mean, a guy who I think the team that would be maybe willing to move on from him because of his big salary and is still a big name is Rick Nash. And if the Rangers get Rick Nash to remove his no move clause and he either goes in expansion to Vegas or gets traded to Vegas, there's a $7.8 million cap hit that helps them for the first year satisfy the cap ramifications, and they can flip him at the deadline and reserve 50% of his salary, and they get a player who's a prominent name, at least for a short period of time. I think that would work possibly.
See, I think the guy that's going to sell the jerseys for them, it'll be like Heischer, a draft pick they're going to get, or Patrick, one of those type players, the young player. They'll probably put him in the lineup, and they might get a name player or two. That just from a big contract standpoint, as Mike just pointed out, it could be like that. So, but I think the one thing with Vegas is, new teams have the honeymoon period. When you need to sell the jerseys is the third and fourth year. By then you need to have a play. In the first year, just the Vegas Golden Knights will be enough alone. And there will be, I'm guessing the first pick is going to be on the roster. Whoever that is. Now, maybe not. Maybe they won't want to damage him and put him back. But
what's McPhee's history? McPhee is kind of relatively conservative, isn't he? In general, if you look at his history.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he does.
I've tried to look at him he likes to build from the defense out, right? He's a guy who likes to build from the defense out for the most part.
Russ would be better prepared to answer this, but I think a guy like Patrick or a guy like Heischer would have a chance of making their roster. If they took a defenseman like Liljegren, I think he would probably be a year or two where they'd want him to play either in Sweden or play in the.
Yeah, Liljegren, by the way, I wish Russ was here because I've been told by NHL teams that he has really fallen on most people's lists.
Yeah, there's some conflicting info because there are some people who, I guess, he played in some tournament just recently where he looked really good. And I know that he was weakened by mono early in the year, but now he's apparently back. But Russ would know better.
Yeah, he would be better at that than I.
We'll definitely have more time to talk about Vegas. I guess we should talk about other things before we.
Well, let me bring this up because Jim Rutherford was on show at noon and talked about the fact that even though they just got Ron Hainsey, he's open to the possibility of picking up another defenseman. And after seeing the news, and I'm just putting two and two together. There's no rumor about this, but after seeing the news about Dallas with Johnny Oduya skating after having his ankle problem for the last 6 weeks, I just have a feeling that might be the direction that they go.
Or Brendan Smith, or Kyle Quincy. They have some interest in Kyle Quincy as well. Now Kyle Quincy is $1 million player, so there's going to be no salary cap issue there, and I think that's crucial as well. I mean, they just want to have depth, and they want they saw last year what happens. They lost Trevor Daley, remember, and they found a way to persevere. They stepped up and
rocked it. It was a crazy year for them. But you're right. I think that makes sense that they would go after somebody, like that. I mean, I've heard Cody Franzen's name mentioned as well. I think he's a little more expensive, right? So
he's over $3 million.
Yeah, I don't see Cody Franzen being a good fit there, but I see any of those players that I mentioned, would work fine. It's funny though. Like, I had talked to Jim Rutherford earlier in the year, and he talked about the fact that at some point they may add some defensive depth, and he kind of made a joke about how it's possible that we could acquire a 20-some minute defenseman, but on our defense, he said he might actually have to play a lot less than that, and and that actually is the truth. I mean, if once everybody's healthy, Hainsey, who was playing 22 minutes and a first pairing defenseman,
right,
in Carolina, could end up being third pairing defenseman.
That's interesting.
The one thing about that Pittsburgh defense, and Ak, you can speak to this too, because you watched the final, as hard as it is to say this, because he is always mentioned in the Norris Trophy mix, but Chris Letang is actually underrated, in my opinion, as a one-on-one defender. We think of him and we think of his skating ability and how dynamic he is, but he is a feisty, prickly one-on-one defender.
One of those words, He is definitely. I've heard lots. I mean, Letang, you're right. You're dead on right. And the thing about Letang, I think that people forget or don't really recognize, is that he has gotten a lot better in his career. I think the first few years of his career, he was immature on some things he did. And he would but his maturing has made him really dangerous. There was a period of time when he just would take really dumb penalties, or would dive or take a dive or whatever and try to draw a penalty. But he stopped.
What he reminds me of, when you watch that cartoon and there's the guy trying to walk into his home from his driveway after coming home from work, and there's a dog that's grabbed his pant leg and won't let go. That's Letang. Defensively, Letang, it just doesn't quit defensively.
He annoys the heck out of people, and he's gotten good at it to the point where he doesn't take penalties now, and that's what really makes him.
Well, I mean, he'll
still take some penalties, but he's
a borderline guy. The guy I sort of compare him to, Kevin. If you remember, early in his career, Boreas Salming got pushed around a lot. He was a very skilled player, but got pushed around a lot, especially by the Flyers. And then he became a master stick guy. He was a guy, you go into the corner with him, and if you mess with him, he was gonna carve you up with like he had a samurai sword. And in a way, Letang is like that. Letang, if you mess with him, he's not the biggest defenseman in the world, but if you mess with him, he will ruin you, and he can do that.
Yeah, he's. He has no quit in him, and he's got a mean streak, and he's ruthless, and he'll hang on to your pant leg, as you try to walk through the door. I've been very, very impressed with him over the last 2 or 3 years and his improvement, defensively, and it's similar in my mind to Brian Rafalski. When he was with the Devils, the initial read on Rafalski is, he was a very good transition defenseman, an offensive guy. But as time wore on, he became known as a guy that just gave no quarter. The image I always have of Rafalski is he had perfected the move of squeezing a player out along the boards. Like the guy would try to drive wide on him, and Rafalski would just sort of ease him into the boards until the guy had zero room to get in. He just perfected that in New Jersey and made himself into a a really strong defensive one-on-one player. And Letang is that I always list him among my most underrated players, even though everybody knows he's a really exceptional player. But I don't think people know how strong he is defensively. I think he's much more competitive one-on-one than he gets credit for.
Why do all these great offensive teams tend to have that guy that's underrated to a degree like that? And people don't realize that, that how important it is for the defense to get the puck to the stars up front is just vital. I mean, without that, you end up those stars up front aren't putting up the kind of numbers that they are, which is McDavid getting back to Darnell Nurse, for example. That's a huge thing for McDavid. And there were points at which in Philadelphia when people would laugh about them signing Andy McDonald to the contract they signed it to, but they did that because he was one of the only defensemen that could get the puck up to Claude Giroux, and they needed that at the time.
But just as Edmonton is about to get Darnell Nurse back, Larson got injured recently. Sekera hurt his hand blocking a shot. So, they may be in the market for a defenseman still. I mean, because we don't know the severity of those injuries, but I think that opens up the possibility of them being in that rental market.
The most fun about the trade deadline to me is how in a normal course of conversation about the NHL season, Kyle Quincy and Brendan Smith and Michael Del Zotto, and these are not guys that focus upon.
Right.
But at the trade deadline, they seem far more valuable.
Oh yeah, and they get top billing on TSN.
Yeah, I mean, and because they're those are the options for improving your team. So. When there's only 6 or 8 guys available, it just enhances their value. But, on trade deadline day, when Brendan Smith is traded, we will talk as if he is a missing piece type defenseman, even though, he probably never lived up to expectations in Detroit. I find the guy to be, and I think this is why he has so many teams interested in him. He's a great teammate. When trouble breaks out, he's at the front of the line. He's not a heavyweight fighter, but he'll go there.
I saw some interesting speculation regarding, because everybody with the Rangers. I saw the Rangers and the Leafs play last night, and the Rangers clearly need a point man on the power play. They're using Brady Shea, who I think is a good young player, but during the playoffs they don't want to put McDonough on the power play because he's going to be playing so many 5-on-5 minutes. So they really need a power play point guy. And that's all reason behind them potentially getting Shattenkirk. But there was some speculation about the Rangers being interested in Brendan Smith, and it went to the fact that Brendan Smith played with McDonough and Derek Stepan at Wisconsin, and would fit right in with the Rangers right away, and it would be a good fit as a rental guy. And stranger things have happened. That might be something. I don't think that's in the head of Jeff Gordon, but I think the Rangers do need that one more defenseman, because I don't think Adam Clendenning and Nick Holden is going to really cut it when it gets down to it in the playoffs.
Well, what it comes down to, if you're the Rangers, do you want to give up a first-round pick and one of your best prospects to get Shattenkirk, or you want to take a chance now? Brendan Smith actually has good offensive instincts. He's never really reached the level that had been projected for him in terms of his offensive. But he was a mighty offensive player at Wisconsin, and he has that ability. He has the skating ability. He has offensive instincts, but he's never fully developed. He's had a bit of Jack Johnson in him a little bit, where a little too much of a risk taker. Although this year he's sort of toned it down a little bit. But I think this year he's become a much more effective defenseman because he has sort of toned it down. And I think he has more to give offensively. I think, part of the problem is he sort of came up under Babcock, and Babcock didn't appreciate his risk-taking.
Right.
And so because of that, I think it's sort of curtailed. And he sort of discouraged Smith from doing the things that made Smith Smith.
Right.
And, maybe even you could make a case, maybe stunted his growth. Now, I don't know if that's accurate, but, maybe Brendan Smith would have never achieved his potential. But saying all that, he could go somewhere is my point. and he will show more offense than he's had in Detroit. He could run a power play. He has that ability to him. He has an offensive knack, and he's not going to cost you a first-round pick and a top prospect. Yeah. So, I could see that as a good fit for the Rangers, to be honest with you.
Well, to your point, Kevin, the other day, Michael Stone was trending on Twitter.
Michael Stone was on my list of top 10 available. Trade deadline players because he's 6'3". Right. He's played over 300 NHL games. He can slot right in, and he can be a dependable defenseman.
Yeah.
And when you look what's available, and you didn't have to give up that much for him. What did they give up? Third round pick and a conditional fifth, something like that.
Yeah, that was it. I know.
And 50% of the salary was retained. But it's ironic because Calgary gets Stone, and now there are reports today that Calgary is looking to trade, and Dennis Weidman would be open to him being moved before the deadline. Sort of you bring in one, you get rid of the other. Weidman has offensive chops. He has in the past, and that I think they could get what Philadelphia potentially could get for a guy like a Streit. I think Streit's a better power play guy, but I think that the return would be comparable for both of them.
Yeah,
I think Weidman's too important to Calgary for them to move him.
No, he's their number 4 defenseman, and now Stone is probably could be their number 4 defenseman if they move him out.
Yeah, but wouldn't they be stronger if Stone is in their third pairing? A lot will depend on how they really feel about their chances. But we talked about this yesterday. I think if you're the Blues, there's been talk about, well, maybe the Blues won't trade Shattenkirk because they need him. Well, there's nothing preventing the Blues from trading and getting a good return for Shattenkirk and then giving up a third round pick or even a second to get somebody back that can fill that role. Shattenkirk it is one of the league's better puck moving defensemen, but he's not among the league's best defensive defensemen. Right. As we know. Right. So, if you think it could help your team, maybe to add somebody who maybe gives you a little more defense, and you feel like you've got enough offense from, Pietrangelo or Pietrangelo and even Perico, who has the nasty shot, right. Maybe you go in that direction. So and I know how much you love the 3-way trades, but it isn't maybe not so much a 3-way trade, but you need 3 components to it in order to make it work for the Blues. So
we love the rumors, three-way trade rumors. We haven't seen too many of them, as you know. But then the really, it's I think the funny thing about my favorite part of the trade deadline when you're talking about that, you got these guys coming in like this who can make a big difference, and usually the ones who make the biggest difference are those kind of guys, because usually the big players don't move, and if they do move, they sometimes don't have as big impact as some of the other guys will have eventually. But I love the concept of a player getting traded on trade deadline day and playing that night for his new team. Like that, it happens very rarely, but you do see it once in a while. That to me is the greatest part of the NHL, when you get these I think we saw it last year with Marty St. Louis, that he actually gets traded in the morning of the trade deadline and ends up playing that night for the Rangers. That 2 years ago, that was something. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I like all that. I think the trade deadline, the NHL has done a really good job of recognizing how important this is, because there's no other sport that has a trade deadline like the NHL's. The NBA has been better, but it's still not quite like the NHL trade deadline in terms of the number of participants. Now, last year was sort of an aberration, but
yeah,
I'm hopeful that we'll pick it up a little bit this year, although there still aren't as many sellers as I think.
There aren't as many sellers at all.
To that point, Kevin, the Parity has limited the amount of selling teams, but I think it's also, the cap restrictions and teams spending so close to the cap that they really don't have the room to be able to maneuver, or have to get really creative to be able to maneuver. And we thought that back when the last CBA was put into place, that the cap retention, which was a Brian Burke idea, was something that would, loosen things up. And now it really, it's got to the point where it really hasn't loosened it up enough. We know that it's a few years until a new CBA, but do you think that there is going to be anything that could maybe loosen things up more, because I think that the NHL has to recognize that deadline day is important to their rights holders. They build a complete day of broadcasting around the trade deadline, and if all you have is the possibility of Kevin Shattenkirk as the only big move, I think it's sort of I don't think it works.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else could be done unless you could say they could retain the full salary, but yeah, I don't know. I know it's been discussed, but
yeah.
I don't think the league cares enough about the television coverage as much as they like just the general attention being paid to it. So we'll have to kind of see how that.
Kevin, feel free. You got to jump off. I know you have limited time.
Well, let me look and see here. Okay, I'm good. All right.
All right. The other thing, I do think that the trade deadline is more about rumors than actual trades. That's why I think that it'll continue to keep, because the funny thing is, the less trades that happen, the more rumors there are. And this is like something that that you've known for the longest time, because a player like Shattenkirk right now is dominating the rumor mill, right? But the second he's traded, that's done. So now so what ends up happening is with the TV and and our coverage and stuff like that is, yeah, it's disappointing when nothing actually happens. But what you end up happening too is the rumors will build and build and build. The more nothing happens. It tends to be this whole thing of like more people talk about this and more people and more players are talking, and more teams are talking to other teams. It's fascinating to watch. Like of course, this has been my life for so long now that I've watched this trend happen the way it happens. It's always fascinating.
Well, I think all NHL trade rumors come out of a fake news site in Russia. No, wait a minute, that's something else. That's some other thing, yeah.
Well played. Yes, they are. The leaks are real, though.
Yeah, the leaks are real. Yeah.
Well, the one thing I think could loosen up things a bit is the results of some games, on the weekend. I mean, we saw Tampa lose to Calgary yesterday. Tampa's at 62 points. The last playoff spot's at 66. 4 points is not enough to, I would say, throw in the towel. But if they lose a couple more games and the playoffs are 8 points away, then maybe Yzerman says, "Okay, I'll trade Bishop. I'll trade Boyle. I'll sell."
Can anyone explain to me why the Tampa Bay Lightning are where they are? I
can't.
That is really perplexing to me. Because I like everything about that team.
I know.
Like I love the what Yzerman does, his GM approach. I think Cooper's a terrific coach. Kucherov's an exciting player. The defense, I get that they're short a top 4 defensemen, but many teams are.
Yeah.
Like it's not like they're the only flawed team. They're all flawed.
Most teams don't have 3 defensemen like they have. It's like I'm just troubled to point out, and I think it just kind of shows you that sometimes every season there are just some inexplicable things that happen that that can just be explained by bad luck.
If there was any team that was prepared to play the season without Stamkos, I thought they would be able to weather the storm. But if you look at their record, they're only 4 games over 500 at home. I mean, it's like
they're in a division that's not strong. Like that's the other thing that's crazy about it. Like they're in a division that they should dominate that division.
There's no explanation.
They go on a 5-game winning streak. They're in 3rd place in the Atlantic. That's the way it is. And that's what happened with Florida. If they get things in line, they could jump right back in the race. But every time they win 2 or 3 games, they lose a game like they lost last night to Calgary, and then it just sets them back. And you think Ben Bishop is playing great, and then you put Vasilevsky in, and he doesn't play well. I mean, there's something that always keeps them back.
And the crazy thing is this, like I was talking to a friend of mine who's a Caps fan, lifelong Caps fan, and he said to me, how it's going to play out. He's like, this is, as a Caps fan, we're going to win. We're going to win the President's Trophy. We're going to be incredible. Tampa's going to get Stamkos back, and they're going to sneak in and get that 8th spot, and they're going to destroy us in the first round. That's what's going to happen. And he said that's what he's expecting to happen.
Well, here's another thing, too, about how every year is different. Like, I've said this on a couple of radio shows. I remember specifically that after the Washington-Pittsburgh series, and Barry Trotz was talking about, what had happened during the series, and he made the point, and it was certainly truth, that the Penguins' speed wasn't a very important factor. The Capitals couldn't get their offense going because the Penguins used the speed to be very disruptive to them. They never got it going. Well, the Capitals have been so impressive, scoring 5 or more goals so often recently. I mean, where everybody's raving about how good they look, but nothing has really changed from last season. The Penguins are still fast, and the Capitals are less so than they were before. So, does that mean when we get to the playoff series, that it's going to, repeat and it's going to be a factor? No, it doesn't mean that at all, because every year will be different. And if Holtby is a little better, like if Holtby stands on it,
better, right? Wasn't it like a 7-game series or?
Yeah, but if he's so if anything could happen is my point. Even though the last year the speed was a big factor, the Penguins are still fast and the Capitals still aren't. But that doesn't mean that when they meet again, that'll play out the same way. So.
I want to ask you one more question before we go, because I reported this earlier in the week and I've been hearing it again, and there's more rumors now coming out that Dean Lombardi could be moving upstairs in LA, and that Rob Blake might be taking over as general manager.
Well, I hadn't heard that. I mean, I hadn't heard that until that came out this week. If I had to speculate, I would say that isn't something that Dean Lombardi wants to happen.
Right.
He is a general manager at heart. He's one of the hardest working GMs. This is the guy that burns the midnight oil. In fact, it's legendary.
Yeah.
A lot of his employees have spoken about, him spending to wee hours in the morning in his office. So I don't know. I mean, if that's what they're attempting to do, I'm pretty sure that this is not something Dean Lombardi wants to do. But we've seen that happen. Even in Philadelphia, of course, you're well aware of that. It's happened in other places as well, where the GM has just kind of moved upstairs, even if that's not what he wanted to do, just to get a fresh perspective. But I guess we'll have to see. He wants to do that. Now, what's interesting is LA, obviously, and I know, kicking Lombardi upstairs, like I'm assuming, are you saying that would be more like a Brian Burke type?
Yeah, exactly. Because
Luke Robitaille, who has a hockey operations background, is the president, but that's seen more as a business thing. So, I'm president of hockey operations.
Yeah, president of hockey operations, something like that.
Yeah, and I believe this week it was reported that Luke was taking a hockey operations job for a team in Europe. I think it was in Germany or Switzerland. I think it was Germany. So I don't know if I'll have to double check on that, but I saw that report, and if that's the case, then that may clear the way for a guy like Blake to take over as a GM. Maybe he found out that he wasn't in the mix, and
we'll find out. I mean, I didn't hear it was going to happen until after the year. Of course, but it's just, perhaps it could happen sooner. Someone just texted me and said perhaps it could happen sooner. I can't imagine what happened sooner, but it's one of those things that it is fascinating, because I feel the same way. I didn't think it would be something Lombardi would be interested in at all. He's such a survivor there. He's all about, keeping his job and staying where he is. He loves it there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I've learned, as you have, that never say never. And just because, it seems odd to me doesn't mean that it's not happening.
Finally today, Phil Forsberg double hat trick. I didn't talk about that. Hat tricks in back-to-back games. And this is the thing with Nashville. They're in that playoff spot right now. Philip Forsberg does this, right? He gets crazy hot for a couple weeks. Usually this has been his history. I mean, this isn't the first time he's scored back-to-back hat tricks. So if Forsberg stays hot, then you can put the Predators in the playoffs, in my mind. Like that's the one thing that they need desperately. They need him to do that. When he doesn't do that, they struggle on the border. When he does do that, they're like they were a couple years ago in the beginning of the year. They're a dominant team.
Yeah, well, I think we thought they were going to be good this year. To me, Rene is key to that team as well. Like, how good is he going to play? Down the stretch. He's been a very good goaltender for a long time, but I think you've got to be exceptional to win in the postseason. You got to be in that .930 and above type save percentage. So,
for sure.
You think he's one of the keys?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. Thanks, Mike. We will be back again tomorrow. Oh no, we won't be. Tomorrow I'll be in Pittsburgh tomorrow and hopefully we'll be playing the game tomorrow night, or we'll be doing it on Sunday. I don't know what's happening at the NHL with the outdoor game.
Yeah, so the thunderstorms supposedly are in the forecast for tomorrow. So if it's Sunday, I may see you, Kevin, on the weekend.
It's like 75 degrees outside right now. It's insane. So here in Philadelphia, it's just I can't imagine, trying to create ice in this weather, but I'm sure they can do it as long as it doesn't rain. But yeah, that's if it rains, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, it's supposed to be. I'm in Michigan. It's supposed to be 70 degrees here today.
Yeah, it's 77 degrees in Pittsburgh right now.
And it's supposed to be 37 tomorrow in Michigan.
Well, maybe their thinking is, if that's happening, then this storm's coming through. That thunderstorm sounds like it's bringing a cold front with it. So maybe we'll be seeing nice weather for an outdoor game on a Sunday, and then get off in the afternoon. If it's cold enough, they could do it in the afternoon.
All right, guys. See you later.
Thanks so much. Remember, Without the Buzz is just hockey. We will talk to you Monday.